Okay, so as I ask each week, what is kind of the main deal that we've been talking about over the last 4 weeks? We have 2 more weeks of this, but the last 4 weeks we've been hanging out and talking about one main idea. What is that main idea? Being set apart, right? So we've been talking about that, and just a quick recap. We first started about submitting, talking about the idea of submitting to authorities in our lives and the people and the places and the things that God has put in our lives to submit to, being set apart in that way, being set apart in the way that we think, in the things that go in our head, the things we allow to go in our heads, the things that we allow our brain to go at, the way that we think and use our head, that's a way that we can be set apart. Another way is the way we speak, the things that come out of our mouths, the things that we say, and understanding the power of the tongue and the things that, that can affect in positive or negative ways. Last week we talked about eating and drinking and honoring God with our bodies and honoring God with the temple that God has given us in those different things. And the next couple of weeks are going to be pretty similar, but what we're talking about tonight, the main question I want us to tackle is, how do we become holy? How do we become holy? Because the idea is that we have this God that is holy, we have this God that is perfect, that loves us, and He desires that we look like Him. We are made in the image of God, but that does not mean that we have arrived. That does not mean, I don't know if you've ever met people that have ever said, do you know who my father is? Do you know, who my dad is? And they use that as, an advantage. I remember one time, this worked out, I didn't lie, but it worked out to my favor. My dad was a fireman. He was a volunteer firefighter for 25 years. And was the chaplain of the fire department in Brighton, outside Rochester. And I actually got pulled over because I had a light out in Williamsville. I got pulled over, and a guy comes up and he talks to me. He says, license registration, we do that whole thing. I had no idea what I did. Is there anything wrong, sir? He's like, yeah, your light's out. That's a ticketable offense and all that stuff. And then he sees my sticker on my car. It said Brighton Fire Department. He's like, is it Brighton Fire Department? I'm like, yeah. He's like, my dad's a volunteer and he's a chaplain. He's like, well, you have a great night then. I'm like, all right. Because apparently there's a Brighton in this area that also has a fire department, and so worked to my favor. So that goes on every car from now on. The thing is, we sometimes treat it like it's something that's just automatically what we become because of who our dad is. We have this Father in heaven that made us. However, we have choices that go into that. We have decisions that we need to make and things that we need to kind of shape and think about when we're following Jesus. It doesn't just happen overnight that I've seen moments, I've seen significant moments in lots of the students in this room's lives where God has done something and you've taken a big step somewhere, but that doesn't mean that you arrived. It just meant you took a step. Because until the heart stops beating, you're always walking and always taking steps. And so tonight we're going to be looking at 1 Peter 1, 13 to 16. So if you have a copy of God's Word, you can open it up. That's where we're going to be hanging out. And you're going to look at it actually in your small groups together as well. And the main verse we're going to look at tonight is 13 and hanging out there. But this is what it says. Therefore, preparing your minds for action and being sober-minded, set your hope fully on grace that will be brought to you at the revelation of Jesus Christ. As obedient children, do not be conformed to the passions of your former ignorance, but as He who called you is holy, you also be holy in all your conduct. Since it is written, you shall be holy, for I am holy. So I want to break this down for us because holiness is important to God. He cares about how we carry Himself. I don't know if you've ever gotten in trouble at home. Most of you probably have never experienced that. You're angels. You've never done anything wrong. But in case there are people in this room that have had things that go wrong, I'm doing this for you. You've ever had a moment where you got to remember, I remember one time my dad saying to me, remember the name that you have. You represent that name. You represent me whenever you're going somewhere. You represent, our family when you make decisions, and that means something. And we want that name to be a good name. And that's kind of when we're as followers of Jesus, our lives should reflect the God that we follow. It shouldn't reflect the God that we conveniently want to create and follow. Because some of us like to kind of make up our own God that really is all about us, that we're at the center of the universe. And it's all about us, what we want, when we want it. And if we're not getting what we want, then God's not doing what we want him to do, so therefore God is bad. But the reality is that God created the universe to revolve around him. And we are to worship him and to honor him and to kind of revolve around him being the center of things. And sometimes we get off track. And so I ask that question again, how do we become holy? If that's something that's important to God, it should be important to us. So the first thing I want us to look at is looking at this passage in verse 13. It says, preparing your minds. We must prepare. Holiness is not meant to be kept in secret. It is to be prepared for. We need to know the expectations, know the mission, and spend time in the Word, being prayerful. We need to think about, I've said this a bunch, but I just think about guys that train for marathons, that train, you guys remember Lance, who spoke at our fall retreat? He just finished the Boston Marathon yesterday, ran it for the third time. He prepares for that. He spends time working, on making sure I can make that mileage, make sure I can get there. And the deal for following Jesus is that we need to prepare. We need to spend time behind the scenes working on us and spending time preparing to be the person God wants us to be. That means having consistent time where you're spending time in the Bible. And this is something that's important. I heard this, Matt Chandler was preaching. I heard him preaching. He said something like, I don't want you to read the Bible. I want you to get to know the God that's in the Bible. I want you, we get caught up, I think, sometimes in our Christianese and our hanging out together, and we're just like, read the Bible, that fixes everything. No, the God that the Bible talks about is the one that's important. That's why we tell you to read the Bible, because that God changes things. That God is transforming. That God does unbelievable things. And yes, we are told in His Word that it is a living Word. It is transforming. It does unbelievable things when we hang out in it, because the God that's written about is powerful and is amazing and is personal and wants to get to know us. So preparation is key. Psalm 119:11 says, I have stored up your word in my heart that I might not sin against you. I've stored up your word. I've hung out in the word so much. I've hung out in the Bible that I got a storehouse in my heart that's just kind of gathering it. And that goodness and that joy and that peace and all that good stuff that comes out of the Bible, that I'm hiding it right here. So that whatever comes out, because it tells us, out of the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks. So if I'm storing up the good stuff in my heart, then the things coming out of me are going to be positive, because I've been preparing well. I've been preparing well to follow Him. Another thing, the second thing here is we must be sober-minded. It says that, being sober-minded and rational, sensible. We need to have our head on straight. We need to be wise about the intake we allow in our head. Kind of going back to what we were talking about a couple weeks ago, we were talking about our thinking. We need to make sure that the stuff that goes in our head, and the way that we're interacting with those things, that they're not affecting our judgment. Because, guys, a lot of times, we live in a world where the news is very depressing. Have any of you guys actually ever stopped to watch the news? It's very depressing. There's not... And normally the good stuff's always at the end, right? Like the puppies and stuff, like the good, and then there's the puppies. But 15 people died here, and 90 people over here, and 103 over here, but then there's puppies. That's the news cycle. Because we're alarmist. Things are always, we're panicking, we're freaking out. What's going to happen? What's going on here? But guys, when we've got this guy Jesus, when you have a relationship with Jesus, it makes no sense, because sometimes things can be going wild in your life. Things are out of control, but there's this peace that just lathers over us. That just makes no sense. And then we sit back and we're like, I don't know why. People look at us, why are you not freaking out? I got Jesus. I got this unbelievable peace because of the God that I follow and knowing that He's good. It says this in Ephesians 5:15-18. It says, look carefully at how you walk, not as unwise, but as wise, making the best use of time, because the days are evil. Therefore, do not be foolish, but understand that the will of the Lord is. And do not get drunk with wine, for that is debauchery, but be filled with the Spirit. He's telling us, be wise with what's going on here. Be wise about how we act. Don't just act rashly. Don't act out of just fear or anything. Act out of a sober mind. Have this thing level. You know, I don't hear of many people that get blackout drunk and say, hey, I made some great decisions that night. I don't think they come out and say, Adam, I got so drunk last night, I made some of the best decisions of my life. No. So there's something to be said when we have a sober mind, when our mind is not infected by junk and filled with stuff that we don't need to know or hear or fear or whatever. Whatever your drug of choice is that we're filling our brains with, we need to be wise about how we engage with those things and live well in front of others and do those things in the honor of God. And the third part of this verse says this: set your hope fully on the grace that will be brought to you at the revelation of Jesus Christ. If you want holiness to be a part of who you are, if you want holiness to be a part of your reality in living this life that God wants us to live, we have to look at our hope and what we're putting in it. We set our hope on Jesus. He's our only hope. We have nothing if we don't have Jesus. And holiness is an impossibility if you're trying to do it on your own. I know we've said this a bunch, but it bears to be repeated because it's something I need to learn all the time, because I always slip back into this thing where I think I've got to earn it, where I think I've got to get better. I've got to get better. I can't keep coming to God with the same stuff. I need to fix me, and then I can come to God. But then, guys, that's not it at all. We need to be looking and saying, I'm setting my hope on Jesus because I'm a wreck. Without Jesus Christ, I'm a wreck. And every one of us, if you go long enough to the point where you're walking away from the Lord and you're doing those things, you will realize that everything is not so fulfilling, that you are going to be disappointed, that you are going to find yourself in a place where it is hopeless. Because where Jesus is not, there is no hope. But where Jesus is, we can realize that we have a God, just like we celebrated a few weeks ago, we celebrated a resurrected King. We celebrated a God that defeated death, that shows us that when we put our hope in Him, He takes that which was once dead and brings it to life and does unbelievable things. In Hebrews 10:10 it says, and by that will, we've been sanctified through the offering of our body of Jesus Christ once for all. It's a process. Even our hope in Jesus doesn't just happen. It happens through experience. The reason I trust Jesus more today than I did yesterday or the day before then is because I've been walking with Him. And when you're walking with somebody for, when I've really seriously been walking with Jesus probably for the last 11 years, I look at those 11 years and He's built a lot of trust for me and to Him by what He's done and how He's been faithful and how He's been good. And so as you take those steps, each and every one of you, as you make those decisions, you may think, you know what, I've just grown up in this thing, I come here because I just like the people, I do whatever. Guys, I'm telling you, if you give Jesus an actual chance to be the Lord of your life and not just the Lord of your Tuesday, if you actually give Him an opportunity, a chance to be the Lord of your life, He will continue to prove Himself faithful over and over and over again. Does it mean it's always easy and fun and great? No. Sometimes it's really hard. But when you put your hope in Jesus, you're putting it in the right place. So like I mentioned before, the goal is to be holy. Verse 16 says, be holy as I am holy. Be holy as I am holy. That is a possibility because of the God that we serve and the fact that He imparts His Spirit within us as followers of Jesus. He gives us His Spirit so that we can do insane, incredible, supernatural things like be holy. Holiness is a superpower, guys. Like, we get really excited about when you watch Superman fly, or, when we watch the Avengers going to be coming out here and, saving the world again, a documentary. It's amazing that we got saved the world again by, it's going to be great. But we look at these superpowers, we were amazed by them. But you know what the greatest superpower, I think, is holiness. There's no way I can be holy. There's no way you can be holy. But holy people exist because we have a holy God that says, hey, come on, I'll walk with you. I'll be with you. I'm going to give you that ability to do something that you on your own would make to be impossible. But we always think flying's cooler, so we think, I can't fly though, so I'm no superhero. Yeah, you are. Because we have a God that gives you an ability to do an impossible thing, which is amazing. And so something just really important for us to think about. So what you're going to do is we're going to be sending you guys your small groups here in a moment. And I really want you to think about your life. I want you to think about, a few of these questions.